This week on World Traveler Cooking, Liem's peanut cookies. Now, every time I used to visit, Liem used to cook all kinds of wonderful foods for me, and many times, these were just wonderful. I already covered ayam santan before. But I never got a chance to cook that one with her. Several times later, I got a chance to cook with her in the kitchen, and the first thing I managed that we made together were these peanut cookies. So keep in mind, my notes are about 10 years old, and the proportions were a little bit inexact, so I'm kind of relying on your spirit to guide me just a little bit on this. I expect them to turn out very well, though. The ingredients are pretty simple. We have, I'll put weights and their conversions in the comments. I have lard. If I were making a halal version, I'd probably use schmaltz instead. That's minyak ayam in Bahasa Indonesia. This is minyak babi. That means pork oil, literally. I have a similar quantity of, by volume, of powdered sugar. I suspect you could use granulated sugar, but it might affect the texture a little bit, so I'm sticking with what I was shown. And another similar quantity of peanuts that we will roast. Here I have 1/2 kilogram of flour, 2 eggs, and I have 1 egg set aside because we will use this egg yolk to top the cookies and leave a little brown spot in the middle of each after they're done baking. So, the first thing we'll do is we will toast these peanuts, and then we'll go ahead and make the rest. Now, to roast the peanuts, I'm going to add the peanuts onto a cold pan with about a spoonful of oil. In this case, since I'm using lard already, I use a spoonful of lard. And then I'm going to put this on a reasonably low heat, and I'm just going to start to stir. Now again, I would use whatever kind of oil you're using for the cookies, but if you're just trying to roast peanuts on their own, I'd probably just use a little bit of peanut oil. And we're going to do this until they are somewhat brown. And I'll be back, I'll show you, and then we'll look at the grinding process. And just so you can see how the roasting process is going, you can see it's been a few minutes. These are starting to brown. So we're going to keep this going, again, at the lowest heat I have for another few minutes, or until we're happy with the degree of roasting. Now, if you can get unsalted roasted peanuts, you could just use those straight. Otherwise, you got to roast them yourself. Peanuts are usually sold here in Indonesia raw, and then they are either boiled or roasted. Peanuts are slightly toxic when they're raw, so they do have to be cooked. Okay, so these are now looking pretty done, so I'm going to take them off the heat. We'll let them cool down a little bit, and then we will grind them. Now, if you have like a hand blender or like an electric chopper, you could probably use that. You want these really finely chopped. I'm going to use the traditional method here, which is an ulekan, which is this large grinding stone here. So I'll show you how this works. So with an ulekan, so one of the standard pounding motions is just an up and down pounding. Now obviously that would take a very long time to grind these with. So sometimes people will just grind them with this rotating motion here. In fact, this is what Liem showed me in terms of how she ground them. So I'm going to grind all of these this way, and then I will be back. So now I'm just kind of finishing this up. You can see the sort of consistency I want, sort of like a coarse meal with some extra large pieces is fine. And I think we're ready to get started here. So I'm going to take a mixing bowl and I'm going to add these peanuts to it first, and we'll add everything else into the peanuts. So the first thing we'll stir in will be the lard. Then the powdered sugar. And then 2 of the eggs. Then into this we'll slowly stir our flour. Probably at this point I'll pause after I get this stirred in. Okay, so here we have the basic beginnings of the dough. And I'm going to continue to add flour slowly, and I'll show you how to tell when we have enough. I suspect it will use at least all the flour I have here, maybe a bit more, but we will see. Now, if you take a little ball of this dough right now, it's not sticky because of all the fat, and you just push it, it just kind of depresses. It doesn't really crack at all, right? Get a nice smooth ball, push it, oh, it's starting to crack just a tiny bit, but not quite enough. We need a bit more flour. As we add more flour, those cracks will become more noticeable. And when we get to the point where they just kind of crack a bit, then we have the right amount of flour. So we're getting there. Faster than I expected, but this is good. Okay, so now showing you where we're at, and I think this is right about where we want to be at. I'm going to take a bit of this. You can see it's starting to get a little bit crumbly, which is a good sign. I shape it into a little ball. I depress it, and you can see how these sort of deep cracks are starting to develop. This is perfect. So from here, I'm now going to shape these out on the cookie sheet, and then we'll add some egg yolk to brown them, and that'll be it. So to form these, we're going to create little balls. Now you want to be careful against over kneading because that seems to reduce the flavor. And then we're just going to take our thumb or finger, we're going to flatten them into discs, but we don't want them to crack too much, just a little bit. Okay, so like this. And then we're going to set these out on a baking sheet, and then I'll show you the next step. So now I have a whole tray of these in, and I have an egg yolk here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take my finger, and I'm going to dab a little bit of egg yolk in that depression in the middle. and these will go in the oven. Now the one problem is, in my notes, I never got exact time and temperature. The reason for that is Liem always used a stovetop oven, and so I don't know that there were time measurements to be had. So I'm just going to go based on my other baking experience, and I'm sure we'll make it work. So I'm going to do, I think, about 180 for maybe 15 minutes. We'll see how these are. I still have some more dough, so if that's too long, I will do a different amount. So these are about to go in the oven. So it took more like 25 minutes at 200. Probably somewhere in between there, so I would start with 25 minutes at 150 and maybe turn up the heat a little bit. But here these are out of the oven. I'm going to let these cool, and then we will do a taste test. And now for the taste test. These don't disappoint. They're rich, flavorful. You really taste the peanuts. The pieces of peanut come through. Sort of like eating a shortbread with a lot of peanuts in it. It's really, really good. I really, really like these cookies. These are one of my favorite Indonesian cookies. Of course, there's some others also, which we'll get to in future episodes. At any rate, if you find this content interesting, I'm sorry I'm sweating so much, but it's hot here in the kitchen. At any rate, if you find this content interesting, I hope I've earned a like and a subscription from you. And please check out my Patreon page, where you can get access to all kinds of not yet released videos. I'm shooting for about 3 to 5 months of material there before it becomes public. If you make this sort of dish and you do it a little differently than me, please feel free to note that difference in the comments. I think sharing techniques is something that we all ought to do more of as cooks, and it makes all these videos that I'm going to start that part again. At any rate, if you find this content interesting, I hope I've earned a like and a subscription from you. By the way, it's really hot in the kitchen, so I am definitely sweating a lot. Aside from that, if you cook this dish and you do it a little differently than me, please feel free to note in the comments how you do it differently. I think that's something that offers a lot of value to anyone who comes to look at these videos from outside. Please also check out my Patreon page. I have between 3 and 5 months of early access content there. So, that's between 12 and maybe 18 or so videos that have not yet been released but are on their way to being released. So if you want to get early access to things, feel free to check out that. Otherwise, bon appetit, and see you next week.